The wall sang. I put my hand flat on it, which is a foolish thing for a grown man to do to a wall, and felt the stone give the sound back into my palm, a woman's voice, low, unhurried, counting something in a tune older than my hold. 1 for the sill, 2 for the sash, 3 for the dust in the corner. Balder Roke, my steward, did not look up from the tally sheets. The bridal wing, he said, there's a keeper in it. There's a keeper in it, I repeated. There has been a keeper in it for 9 years, my lord. You approve her wage every spring. You sign it with a very large I and a very tired V. The bridal wing was my father's grief made of doors. 41 chambers, each one furnished to the last cushion, each one waiting for a Luna who never came, because my father had believed, all his long, stubborn life, that if he made a place beautiful enough, the woman it was meant for would feel it from across the world and start walking. My mother died before the 9th door was hung. He built 32 more. When he went, I sealed the wing and told myself I had done something wise, and then I paid a woman for 9 years to keep dusting it. Apparently, which is not wise, that is only what happens when a man does not read what he signs. 4 for the ash, 5 for the grate, 6 for the mouse who won't sit straight. I am the Alpha King of Ilmark. I have stood in front of an armed moot and told them no. I went up that gallery stair like a boy, going somewhere he'd been forbidden. The wing smelled of cold wax and cedar. Every door stood shut but one, and through it I saw a woman on her knees at a hearth with her sleeves pushed past the elbow, scrubbing the grate of a fireplace that had not held a fire since before my mother's death. The bed behind her was made. The bed had been made for 30-some years, for nobody, and she had plumped its pillow that morning. I could see the print of her hand still on it. She sang while she worked, not performing the way a person breathes when they're alone and have decided the quiet is unbearable. Then it happened. Somewhere under my breastbone, in the hollow place where for 9 years there had been nothing but weather, something hummed. Not a growl, not a stir, a hum, a low, tuneless, hopelessly earnest hum, like an old man in the back of a hall who does not know the words and is joining in anyway. My wolf had not made a sound in 9 years, not a howl at the moon, not a snarl at a rival, not so much as a sigh when I lay down at night. The hold called it grief. The hold was being kind. My wolf had spent its whole voice in 3 days at the fever graves and had never once opened its mouth since, and I had built a life on the understanding that it never would again. It was humming, off-key. It was humming off-key at a woman scrubbing a grate. I must have made a noise because she looked up. She was not startled, which I found remarkable, and then found unreasonable, and then found that I liked. Perhaps 40. Human, no wolf in her at all, you can tell at a glance, and I had told at a glance. Gray in her hair at one temple, a smudge of soot along her jaw, and a pair of steady brown eyes that took in the whole of me, crowned to boots, and made a decision I was not privy to. My lord, she said, and got up, and dusted her hands on her apron unhurried. You're the keeper. Nessa Reich. There's no one in these rooms. No, my lord. You made the bed. I make it every 9th day. She looked at it, and then at me, and something at the corner of her mouth moved. It gets untidy on its own, apparently. Rooms do when no one's watching them. Behind my ribs, the hum came again, warmer. I said, carry on, in a voice like a door falling shut, and I turned around and went down the stair too fast, and I did not stop until I was in the map room with my hands on the table, listening to my own chest like a man who has heard a burglar in his cellar. Balder had not moved. Well, there's a keeper in it, I said. I did say. That was the morning. The afternoon brought the rider from Kest. He came in wet. It rains on Ilmark 9 months of the year. We are famous for it. We have 11 words for it. And he did not kneel, which told me the shape of his message before he opened his mouth. Alpha Rolf Dane of Kest calls the right of voices, he said, at the equinox, 31 days. Balder set down his pen. That was all he did, and it was the loudest thing in the room. Here is what the right of voices is, and I will say it plainly because I have watched southern lords tie themselves in poetry over it. Every hold's strength is its alpha, and an alpha's proof is not his arm. Arms lie, arms can be bought, arms get old. His proof is his wolf's voice. At the right, the moot gathers, and each alpha stands and lets his wolf answer, and every wolf in the hall hears whether the thing that answers is whole. You cannot counterfeit it. Men have tried. A wolf's voice is the one part of us that cannot be trained to be sincere. A hold whose king's wolf cannot answer is a hold with a hollow at the middle of it, and the moot does not leave hollows standing. They fold it into the nearest strong hold, kindly, with paperwork. Ilmark would keep its name for a generation and lose it in 2, and Kest would keep our valleys and our salt road and our 41 absurd empty bedrooms. He knows, Balder said when the writer had gone. He suspects. My lord, the whole north suspects. You have not howled at a moon in 9 years, men notice. 9 years and nobody called it. 9 years and nobody had a reason to want your valleys. Now the salt road pays. Balder rubbed his eyes. He was 70 and had served my father and had never once in my life told me a comfortable lie. You have 31 days to make your wolf speak. It doesn't take requests. Then we should discuss terms with Kest early. The early ones are always better. I went to the window. Rain on slate, rain in the yard, rain on the long black roof of the bridal wing, where a woman I had met that morning was probably making a bed for nobody. And under my breastbone, quiet as a thumb on a drum, the hum. I said nothing about it. What would I have said? My wolf, dead these 9 years, has developed opinions about the housekeeping. 31 days, I said, we'll see. It got worse. I want that understood. Whatever you are imagining, it got worse than that. 3 days after, I was in council with the valley heads, hearing a 2-hour argument about a boundary hedge, which is the true work of kings, and nobody puts it in the songs. Nessa Reich came across the yard below with a basket of linen, and she was singing the counting song, the one about the sill and the sash, and my wolf hummed. Out of my mouth, aloud, in the middle of Farron Ole's testimony about his grandfather's hedge. 11 valley heads turned and looked at their king, who was humming. I stopped. There was a silence with a great deal of geology in it. Continue, I said. Farron Ole continued. Balder, at my elbow, wrote something down, and I did not need to look to know it was not about hedges. After that my wolf abandoned all shame. It hummed when she sang in the yard. It hummed when she sang in the wing, 2 floors up and through 3 feet of stone, which should not have been possible, and which I later confirmed was not possible for anyone else. Because I asked, casually, whether anyone else could hear singing, and my armsmaster looked at me the way you look at a man who has been alone too long. It got me out of bed. That was the worst of it. 3 mornings running I woke at the gallery door with my boots on and no memory whatsoever of the stair, standing outside chamber 9 like a large embarrassed dog, and on the 3rd morning the door opened, and there she was with a bucket. My lord, Reich, we regarded one another. The flu, I said. The flu. In chamber 9, I've had reports. From the mice, she said. They're very forthcoming. I have been Alpha King of Ilmark for 9 years. I have negotiated with Rolf Dane, who negotiates like a man skinning something. I stood there with my ears going red. Come in then, said Nessa Reich, and look at the flu. And she went back to her bucket, and I came in and looked at the flu. That was the beginning of the worst and best month of my life. I invented reasons. I want to be honest about this, because I have since heard the version the hold tells, and in the hold's version I am wise and gallant, and in the truth I was a man of 41 years telling a housekeeper that I needed to personally inspect the window casements. The casements, then the inventory, then a matter concerning cedar. Then, and I would like it noted that this one was genuine, a genuine leak. And she let me. That is the thing I still cannot get over. She never once said, "What are you doing here?" She handed me a cloth. She had me hold the other end of a sheet. She sent me up on a stool to reach a rail, the Alpha King of Ilmark on a stool, holding a curtain rail, while a human woman below him said, left, my lord. We talked the way you talk when your hands are busy, which is the only honest way men like me ever talk at all. 41 rooms, I said one afternoon in chamber 22, which is done all in green because my father went through a green period. You dust 41 rooms nobody enters. I enter them. For 9 years. It's work. She snapped a sheet out flat, it cracked like a sail. It's not the worst kind, nobody watches, nobody wants anything, and the rooms are beautiful, my lord, whatever else. Somebody meant every one of them. My father meant them at a woman who was already dead. Her hands didn't stop. That was another thing about her. Nothing I said ever made her hands stop. I know, she said. That's why I sing in them. Why? She thought about it. She was a woman who let a question sit until it had told her what it actually was. A room that nobody's used isn't empty, she said. It's waiting. Waiting's a hard thing to do for 30 years with nothing in you but furniture. So I put something in them. She shrugged and tucked the corner, and I understood suddenly that she was slightly embarrassed, and that the embarrassment cost her something, and that she'd said it anyway. It's only noise, but it's the same noise my mother made in our kitchen, and I can't hear that room anymore, so. The hum came up in me, so hard I had to turn away and look out at the rain. Your village, I said. Burned long time ago now. I came north because the north takes anybody. The north takes anybody, and gives them a wolf hold that never lets them forget they haven't got a wolf. Oh, that, she almost laughed. They're not cruel about it, they just look at me the way you look at a chair that's talking. My lord, I've been in this hold 9 years, and I've been called by my name perhaps 4 times. And one of them was you, in chamber 9, telling me about mice. I turned around. Nessa, I said. The hum in me went absolutely still, which is a thing I had not known silence could do, go still with somebody instead of at them. She looked at me for a moment. Something went across her face, quick, and put itself away. 5 then, she said, and went back to the bed. I should tell you why my wolf stopped. 9 years ago the fever came up the salt road. It took the young and the old, and it did not care whose son you were. It took my mother in 6 days. It took my brother Avon, who was 22, who was better than me at everything except being born first in 9. I dug. That is what I remember of that spring, not the crown, not the oath, not my father's face when they told him, though I am told my father's face was a thing to see. I remember that I dug for 3 days, and I howled while I dug, and my wolf howled with me, and the sound went out over Ilmark for 3 days and nights until every wolf in the valleys was howling too, hundreds of them, the whole hold sounding like one animal being torn open. And then on the 4th morning I got up, and there was nothing. Not grief, grief is loud, grief is a full room. Nothing. My wolf had opened its throat and poured out everything it had, every sound it would ever own, and there was no more. I did not tell anyone for a year. Then I told Balder, because Balder does the accounts and a king's silence has costs. And Balder said, "Ah," and wrote it down, and never mentioned it again. And that was one of the 4 or 5 great kindnesses of my life. I ruled quiet. I found it works mostly. Men lean in when you don't shout. But every year the hold got a little more careful around me, the way you get careful around a wall with a crack you've decided not to look at, and no woman ever came near the bridal wing, and I never once opened those 41 doors because I knew what was in them. My father's whole life, arranged in furniture, waiting for someone who was never coming. That is the man Nessa Reich found on a stool, holding a curtain rail. 12 days before the equinox, Balder brought me the solution. He is a good man. I want that understood too, before I tell you what he said, because he was not being a snake. He was being a steward, and a steward's whole art is to look at a disaster and find the door in it. The right, he said, I have it. Have you? Your wolf answers the Reich woman. I said nothing. I had told him nothing. He had watched me for 9 years. You cannot tell such a man anything. You can only fail to correct him. So we put her on the dais, said Balder. Behind the king's chair. When your turn comes, she sings a hymn, something with a right shape to it. Nobody will blink, and your wolf answers, and the moot hears a whole voice, and Kest goes home with his teeth in his own pocket. He spread his hands. It is not a lie, my lord. The voice is real. We are only arranging the room. Arranging the room. In my hold, that phrase. No, I said. Balder blinked, my lord. No. It costs her nothing. She stands, she sings, she is paid triple, she goes back to her dusting a wealthy woman. And every alpha in the North sees the king of Ilmark bring out a woman to make his wolf work. I was up. I had not decided to stand. They'll know inside a year what she is to me. And then she isn't a woman, Balder. She's a lever. She's the thing you take or threaten or buy if you want Ilmark's king to be quiet again. My father spent his whole life making rooms for a woman, and I will not spend her in 12 days to keep the roof over them. Balder was quiet a long moment. You've decided this in front of me, he said, so that you can't take it back. Yes. That's very like your brother. That went in about 4 inches. He knew it would. He is 70 and he does not waste a shot. Then we treat with Kest, I said. Early terms, you said the early ones are better. She came to me 2 days later in the map room in the evening with the rain going sideways past the window, and she stood in the door with her hands folded and said, "I'll do it." I had been at the table for 3 hours doing arithmetic on the ruin of my house. It took me a moment to travel. "Do what?" "Sing at your right." Her chin was up. "I heard your steward, not on purpose. The man talks in stairwells. He'll be the death of you." "But I heard him and I've thought about it for 2 days and I'll do it. It's a song. It's nothing. My lord, it's nothing and you'd keep your valleys." "No, you haven't thought about it." "I've thought about very little else." "Then think better." It was the first time I had heard her voice go up. It went up beautifully. "You'd lose a hold, your father's hold, all those valley men with their hedges. Do you think Kest cares about a hedge? Over what? Over manners, because it would look poor. Because it would make you a thing worth taking." She stopped. "They will see it," I said. "Not the song, what's under the song. There isn't a wolf in that hall who won't hear what my wolf sounds like when it answers you, and there will be 9 alphas at that right, and at least 3 of them keep a ledger of what a man loves. Right now you are a room keeper that nobody in the North has ever heard of, and Nessa, that is the safest thing you have ever been. I'm not spending it." "It's mine to spend." "Yes," I put my hands flat on the map, on my own valleys. "And you can walk out of that door and go and sing at that right, and I couldn't stop you, and I wouldn't try, and you'd be right that it's yours. But you'd be doing it because you heard an old man in a stairwell say my house is falling down. That's not a gift, that's a debt. I've had a debt marriage in this family already." I heard my own voice go rough and could not do anything about it. "My father built 41 rooms for a woman who owed him nothing and got nothing. I'd sooner lose the valleys than have you stand behind my chair and be useful." The rain went on for a while. "You're an extremely stupid man," said Nessa Reich unsteadily. "Yes. I've been useful for 9 years. It's not the insult you think it is." "It is when it's you." Her mouth opened. Nothing came out. She stood there in my doorway with her hands in her apron and the lamp behind her, and I watched a woman who had been called by her name 5 times in 9 years try to find a place to put a sentence like that, and fail, and give up. "Good night, my lord," she said and went. My wolf did not hum. My wolf, for once in that entire miserable month, understood the assignment and kept its mouth shut and ached. The right of voices fell on a clear day. It always does. It rains 9 months a year on Ilmark, and it did not rain on the day I lost it, which I have never forgiven. They came in from every hold in the north, 9 alphas, their seconds, their moot men, 400 wolves in my great hall with the doors thrown open, and the equinox light coming down through the high windows in bars you could have leaned on. Rolf Dane of Kest came last, because of course he did, a big gray-faced man with an old man's patience and no malice in him at all, which is the frightening kind. He is not a villain. I want that on the record because it would be easier if he were. He is a good alpha who saw a hollow in the north and moved to fill it, and if our places were swapped, I would have done the same and told myself the same story. He gripped my forearm at the door. "Ivor." "Rolf, I hope you sing today," he said and meant it, and would have folded my hold into his by nightfall anyway. The rite is simple. The moot man calls the holds in order of age. The alpha stands. His wolf answers. The hall listens. Kest is younger than Ilmark. Rolf stood third. When his wolf gave voice, the sound came up out of him like a slab of stone coming out of a hillside, enormous, whole, no crack in it anywhere, and the hall gave it back, 400 throats, and the windows shook in their leads. Some of the younger men were weeping. That is what a whole voice does. It is not fear, it is the opposite of fear. I sat and listened to the thing I used to be able to do. Then the moot man called Ilmark. I stood up, and I want to tell you that I tried, that there was some heroic wrenching in me. There wasn't. I stood in the light in my father's hall and looked down at 400 faces and reached inside for the animal that had gone quiet on me at a graveside 9 years ago, and there was nothing there but a great, patient, exhausted silence. It went on, they let it go on, the moot is scrupulous, they gave me the whole count. Somewhere a man coughed. Balder at the foot of the dais was looking at his shoes. I could have faked it. I could have thrown my head back and done the thing with my throat that any alpha's son learns at 14, and made a sound and let them decide. Half of them might have let it pass. My wolf spent its voice 9 years ago, I said instead. The hall went so quiet I could hear the light. At the fever graves, on my mother and my brother. It howled for 3 days and then it had no more, and it has not made a sound since, and I have ruled you quiet for 9 years and let you think what you liked. I found Rolf Dane's eyes. You called it right. There's a hollow at the middle of Ilmark, and it's me. I'll not stand here and counterfeit a voice in the one right that exists so men can't. Call the terms. Rolf Dane stood up slowly. He looked, if anything, sorry and satisfied, both at once, which is how good men look when they win something they went to a lot of trouble for. Ilmark, he began, under the moot's hand. And that is when someone opened all 41 doors. You could hear them. That's the thing nobody believes when I tell it. The bridal wing runs the whole south length above the hall, and its gallery looks down through arches into the roof space. And when 41 heavy cedar doors are thrown wide, one after another fast, by somebody running, it sounds like a hold clearing its throat. 400 heads went up. And Nessa Reich sang. Not a hymn, not a right shape. She stood at the gallery rail in a housekeeper's apron with soot on her jaw and sang the counting song, 1 for the sill, 2 for the sash, 3 for the dust in the corner. The small, stupid tune she had been singing into my father's empty rooms for 9 years, while a hold that could not be bothered to learn her name paid her 12 coppers a week to do it. I have thought about that for a long time since. She could have sung anything. She had 2 days' warning and a voice that could have managed a hymn. She sang the work song, and I know why, because that was the true thing. That was the sound she had actually been putting into the emptiness. Anything else would have been arranging the room. The hum came up in me on the second line. Then it wasn't a hum. I have been told what it sounded like. Balder says he thought the roof was coming down. My armsmaster, who is a hard man, sat down on the floor. Farron Ole, who argued about a hedge for 2 hours, has told the story in every inn between here and the sea and adds a detail each time, and I let him. What I know is this: 9 years of it came out of me at once. Everything the fever took, everything I dug, my mother's hands, even at 22 laughing at me from the top of the orchard wall. 9 years of a hold going careful around a crack. It came up out of my chest, and it went out over 400 wolves, and it was not a howl of grief. It was an answer. It went up to the gallery, to her, the way a thing goes home. The hall knew. Every wolf in that hall knew inside 2 heartbeats, because that is the one sound in the world that cannot be trained to be sincere. The sound a wolf makes when the other half of it is standing above him in an apron, singing about dust. They answered, all of them, the whole moot, Kest's men and mine and every hold in the north. 400 throats going up at once, and the windows shaking in their leads, and somewhere under it the 41 open doors ringing like pipes. And Nessa Reich stood at that rail with both hands over her mouth and her eyes absolutely streaming, because I do not think, until that moment, she had understood what she had. When it stopped, my ears rang. Rolf Dane was standing very still with the terms in his hand. That, he said at last, is not a hollow. No, I said. He looked up at the gallery. He looked at me. I watched him do the arithmetic, the same arithmetic I had done in the map room at 3 in the morning, the ledger of what a man loves, and I watched him, being a decent man on a good day, decide not to keep the column. He tore the terms across. Ilmark stands, said Rolf Dane, and then, because he is Kest and could not help himself. Ivor, 9 years, you could have said. I've said now. You have. He gripped my forearm again, and under his breath, dry as a stick. Ask her before somebody else does. There's 200 men in this hall about to find out she's not married. I went up. That was deliberate, and it is the only part of that day I planned. The stair from the hall to the gallery is 41 steps. My father counted in rooms, and I have never once been able to prove it wasn't on purpose. And I went up all of them in front of the whole moot, which meant every man in that hall watched their king climb to a room keeper instead of sending for her. She had got her hands down off her mouth by then. She was scrubbing at her face with her apron, which only moved the soot around. You said no, she said, wobbling. I said no to Balder. You said no to me, in the map room at some length. I said no to you doing it because you heard an old man in a stairwell. I was out of breath. 41 steps. I have been telling people it was the stairs for 8 years. Nobody sent you. No. Nobody's owed. No. Then why? And Nessa Reich, who came north because the north takes anybody, who kept 41 rooms warm for nobody for 9 years, who had been called by her name 5 times, looked at me with her face wrecked, and said, "Because I've been singing into empty rooms my whole life, my lord," and something answered. The hall below us was 400 wolves pretending very hard not to listen. I did not care. I have never cared less about anything. "I'm going to ask you," I said, "and you can say no, and tomorrow the wage still comes, and the wing's still yours, and nobody in this hold will ever hear a word of it from me. I need you to believe that before I ask. Do you believe it?" She looked at me for a long moment. "Yes," she said. "That's the trouble with you." Then, "Ivor," said Nessa Reich, and it was the first time, and my wolf made a sound I have no name for, small and undignified, right there in front of the entire North. "Yes, ask properly later. There's 400 people down there and you've gone the color of a beetroot." We did not do the great ceremony. There was one later because a hold needs one and Balder would have expired. And she wore green out of chamber 22, my father's green period finally justified after 30 years. But that is not the part I keep. The part I keep is what we did with the wing. She would not have it. That was the first argument of our marriage, and I lost it in under a minute, which set a precedent I have never recovered from. I offered her the bridal wing, all of it hers, the whole 41, the thing my father built for Aluna. And Nessa Reich stood in the middle of chamber 9 and said, "For what? So I can dust them for another 9 years, only now nobody's paying me." So we opened it. The whole wing, the doors off their hinges, to whoever the North had nothing for, the burned out, the roofless, the fever orphans grown crooked, the old women with no valley left to belong to. 41 furnished chambers. My father made them beautiful for a woman who never came, and it turns out that if you make a place beautiful enough, somebody does start walking. He was only wrong about the number. It is the loudest part of the hold now. You cannot hear yourself think on that gallery. Balder has complained about it, formally, in writing, every spring for 8 years. And every spring I sign the complaint with a very large I and a very tired V and put it in the drawer. And at night, in the plainest room in the wing, number 9, which she picked, because of the mice, and because a man once stood in the door of it and told her a lie about a flu, my wife hums while she does her hair. And under my breastbone, in the hollow place, my wolf hums back. It is terrible. I want to be clear about this after everything. 9 years of silence, and what came back is not that great voice from the right, not the thing that shook the windows. In the dark, in a small room, my wolf hums like an old man in the back of a hall who does not know the words and is joining in anyway. It is flat, it is consistently, unrepentantly flat. She has never once corrected it. That is what I would tell my father if there were any telling him. Not that the hold stands, not that Kest went home, not that the rooms are full. Only that on the far end of all that waiting there is a woman doing her hair in the 9th room, and a sound so bad you would not put it in a song, and I would not trade one note of it for a whole northern spring. Balder stayed after the others went. He does that perhaps twice a year. I have learned to dread it the way you dread a physician who sits down. 9 years ago, he said, you came to me in this room and told me your wolf had no voice. Do you remember what I said? You said, ah. I said, ah, and I wrote it in a book, and the book is in a locked drawer and no living soul has read it. He was turning his pen over in his fingers. I have thought a great deal about that afternoon, my lord. I have wondered whether I did you a service or a very long injury. You kept it. I helped you keep it. There's a difference, and I've had 9 years to find it. He put the pen down. Your father would have gone out into that yard and roared it at the hold the day it happened. He'd have been wrong, and it would have been a catastrophe, and he'd have got drunk for a month, and in a year everyone would have known, and by now it would be an old thing. A hold can live with an old thing. It's the careful that kills you. 9 years of 100 men not asking a question. That's what Rolf Dane smelled from 40 leagues, not your silence, our manners. I did not answer that, because there was nothing in it that was not true. You never once said, no. Why not? Balder looked up. He is a small, dry man who has served this house for 51 years, and I have seen his face do exactly 4 things in my lifetime. Because you were 29, he said, and you had buried your mother and your brother in the same week, and there was a crown on the table and no one else to put it on. And you came to me in a room and told me the truth about yourself, which your father never once did in 40 years. I was not going to be the man who made you regret it. He gathered his sheets. It was the greatest privilege of my service, my lord, and it may yet cost you the hold. Both of those are so. He got to the door. "Baldert, my lord." Avon would have laughed at me. "Avon," said Balder, "would have laughed at you for a week and then dug beside you and then howled the roof off. He was a very loud young man. It is the only respect in which I have ever thought him your better. 12 days. I can give you them by room. Chamber 9, the flue, which was fine. Chamber 11, the casement, which was also fine, and which I got open by taking the frame apart with my hands, and she stood back and let me, and afterwards said, 'You could have sent a joiner,' and I said, 'I could have,' and she said nothing at all with tremendous eloquence. Chamber 16, the inventory. She keeps 9 years of it, a stack of ledgers in a press, every stick of furniture in the wing, every candlestick, every quilt, checked twice a year in a small square hand. I sat on the end of a bed nobody has ever slept in and read 4 years of a woman's handwriting about cushions, and it was the most interesting document in my archive. "Why," I said, "nobody checks it. You'd notice if a thing went missing. I've never once been in here." "No," she was up a stool with a rail again. "But you would, and then it'd be my word." She glanced down. "My lord, I'm the only one in this hold with no wolf in her. If a silver goes, I want a book that says when it stopped being there." I sat with that. It is not a comfortable thing, learning what your own hold is like from underneath. "Nobody would accuse you." "Nobody has," she agreed. 9 years. And then, because she is not a liar and cannot make a thing prettier than it is, I'd still like the book. Chamber 22, the green. Chamber 28, which is done in a blue so dark it eats the candle, and which she told me she does not sing in and would not say why, and which I have never asked about since and never will. Chamber 31, the leak. That one was real. It came in over the lintel in a slow brown fan, and we got the bed out from under it between us, the two of us shoving a walnut frame across a floor at midnight in the rain. And when it was clear, she sat down flat on the boards with her back against the wall and laughed until she had to hold her own ribs. And I sat down beside her because my legs had stopped taking instruction. And I looked at a woman laughing on a floor in my father's terrible, beautiful wing. And the hum in my chest was so loud I was astonished the rain could be heard over it. 31 rooms, she said, wiping her eyes. You've been in 4 of them in your life, and you've been in 3 of them this fortnight. There's 41. There's 41, she agreed. And my lord, if you say the word casement to me one more time, I'll put you out that window myself. Chamber 40, the last one. That one I asked to see. She stopped at the door with her hand on it. It's not finished, she said. It wasn't. Bare walls, bare boards, a bed frame with no bed in it, and 1 chair. And on the floor by the chair, a ring of candle stubs burnt down to nothing, 40 or 50 of them in a rough circle, years old. He sat in here, I said. Every night at the end. The wing had a keeper before me, old Marad, she told me before she went. He'd have his supper down there, and then he'd come up and sit in the room he hadn't finished. Nessa's voice was very level. She said he was the only man she'd ever met who could wait like that. She said it was a talent and a curse, and that it was the same thing. I looked at the chair for a long time. He was mad, I said. He was patient, said Nessa Reich, at the wrong thing, and she shut the door, and I went down the 41 steps and did not sleep. Avon had a theory about the wing. He was 19 when he told me it. We were up on the orchard wall, which is where we conducted the entire business of our lives, and he had a stolen pair, and he said, "You know what does doing up there, don't you?" Losing his mind. He's writing a letter, Avon took a bite. 41 rooms, and every one of them says the same thing, which is come back. He's not building for a woman he hasn't met, Ive. That's what the hold thinks. He's building at Ma. Ma's dead. I know she's dead, so does he. That's the whole point of it, you enormous plank. He got the pear juice off his chin with his wrist. You can't write to the dead, so he's doing it in furniture. It's the only language he's got, and he's not going to shut up in it just because there's no post. That's the saddest thing anyone has ever said. It's not sad, it's magnificent, said Avon, who was 19 and thought everything was magnificent, and who had 3 years left. And when you're king, you'd better not seal it up, because it'll mean you didn't understand a single thing about him. I sealed it up 11 weeks after I buried him. I want to be exact about this, because I have let the hold believe it was policy. It was not policy. I went up there in the second month with a hammer in my hand, and I got as far as the gallery door, and I heard how quiet 41 furnished rooms are, and I could not do it. So I locked it instead and told Balder to keep paying whoever was inside, and never went back. And in 9 years I did not once say my brother's opinion out loud to anybody. He was right, of course. He was 19 and eating a stolen pear, and he was right, and I have had 18 years to think of a better answer, and I never have. The wing went quiet. I did not understand at first what was wrong with the hold. I sat through a morning of grain figures with the distinct sense of a tooth gone missing. Then Farron Ole said something about the Saltrode, and I heard my own hall, the actual sound of it, the boots and the pots and the rain, and understood that for 2 months there had been a woman singing over the top of all of it, and now there was not. She had stopped. She did not leave. I checked, God help me. I stood in the yard at dusk like a fool and counted the lamps in the wing until I found hers. She was up there. She was working. She was simply not singing, and my wolf, which had spent a month embarrassing me in front of 11 valley heads, had nothing to hum at and lay in the hollow of me like a stone in a bucket. 2 days. I want to tell you I understood what it was. I thought she was angry. I sat in the map room doing arithmetic on the ruin of my house and told myself she was angry and that it was fair, and that a man who has told a woman I'd sooner lose the valleys has forfeited the right to be sung at. It was Balder who put me right, because it is always Balder. She's not sulking, he said from behind his sheets, not having been asked. I didn't say she was. You have said very little else for 2 days at some volume in your face, he tore.